Now let's talk with Grace. Grace, masterful job of unpacking the Lazarus story. I recall when United Church of Christ minister David Chevrier collapsed of a heart attack during a speech he was given to the Illinois Coalition on the Death Penalty, and didn't breathe for 15 minutes after quadruple bypass and weeks in rehab, surrounded with hundreds of parishioners in the hospital. They broke all the rules. He was back in the pulpit and he preached on Lazarus. The transforming power of God's love. Isn't that what that's about?
That is. And I wanted to work with that passage because it has ideas of patience in there. Mary and Martha patiently waiting for Jesus. And Jesus patiently being in God's time, refusing to be rushed by death. And the story you have told all of us, patiently waiting for God's time. And that story opened that for me. And in the African tradition of storytelling, where the story tells the definition of patience, waiting on God on that.
Endurance, in the midst of tough times, huh?
Yes.
I think this is a fascinating story because it's one of the few stories where you realize that Jesus had deep friendships.
Yes.
That there was an inner circle of people, Mary, Martha, Lazarus, who really meant something to him in a different way from the people he was ministering to, the strangers. And in this one where he breaks down and cries, you realize that was a real friendship for him. Can you say more about what friendship means for Jesus and how that plays out in other places in Scripture?
I love that you talk about friendship because friendship is, Jesus and Lazarus have this friendship. Whenever Jesus needs a friend, it seems like he goes to Bethany and he hangs out with Lazarus and Mary and Martha. On Palm Sunday, before he begins his parade that leads to the cross, that night he spent in Bethany. And I always wonder, I wish I could have eavesdropped what he and Lazarus were talking about, friend to friend. I mean, maybe he said, I'm so afraid of what's going to happen on Friday. And maybe Lazarus said, don't worry about it, been there, done that, I died, remember? You can do this. The friendship that is not, something goes on there that's not recorded in our scriptures that we don't eavesdrop on. And so I'm glad you mentioned friendship there.
I must ask you, Grace, about the Bethany moments in your own life. When have you been at the gates of Bethany?
Bethany is, I love Bethany. I love Bethany. Things happen in Bethany that I see that have not happened elsewhere. Bethany is a place of extravagance where this woman came and broke the alabaster jar on Jesus's feet and just this costly nard. Bethany is the place where we find the last time Jesus was seen was in Bethany. It is the place of ascension. So I have experienced Bethany in experiencing generosity. I think in my congregation is one of the most incredible places I know of a Bethany moment where I serve a congregation that is so generous, not just to me, but to one another and to strangers in there. Where have you experienced Bethany moments?
Oh, my goodness, just being here with you and yes. Lillian in this moment. I mean, you've been on the show several times before, Grace, and you are what your name implies. The grace in your authentic vision and discipleship. And my Bethany moment, I guess, would be in terms of gratitude. Gratitude, I guess. Every day, every night before I go to bed, every morning when I awaken. Gratitude for God's blessings in the midst of so many trials and tribulations. But take us back to Kenya, because I know, Lillian, we wanted to ask Grace about
I was so interested that you've lived in the U.S. for a number of years and are pastoring in a mainline American denomination, and yet with your Kenyan background, I imagine that the sermon is an amazing opportunity for cross-cultural dialogue whenever that happens. And tell us how the Spirit works through that. I know your book of sermons is selling very well, and I suspect it's because of this very unique voice you bring to the table.
You know, Lillian, the amazing thing is wherever you go in the world, and I've traveled quite the world quite a bit and lived in different parts of the world, and it's amazing. People are still people. I pastor churches in different parts. I've pastored a church in Kenya, I've pastored a church in England, and now I'm pastoring in Wisconsin. And once in a while, other than the language people speak, and people are still the same, you know. And I think my challenge is on how to present the same message but in different vessels that we understand. The way of speaking sometime in Wisconsin is quite different from the way people speak in Kenya. In Kenya, the story is everything. Mm-hmm. Any point is made in the vessel of a story. And I know the book on, my book on a collection of sermons is popular in divinity schools these days and in Bible studies around the country because it offers a different vessel of bringing the same message, the vessel of a story, a good story.
I'm sitting here thinking, you are the wife of a gifted photographer, yes. David, and the mother of your precious son, Eric Magamba.
Yes.
And the storytelling must be a huge part of your parenting, your mothering little Eric. And what kind of stories do you share with him about our faith and our
What a challenge! What a challenge Eric is. Eric is 7 years old, and I tell him a story every evening, an African story. And he is so American. He wants the story to be exactly the same, you know, day after day. But an African story changes because I'm not the same person I was yesterday. So sometimes I will go on a little bit longer in some parts, and he'll say, that's different. That wasn't there last week. And I'll say, yeah, the story grew. And the story is as long as his bedtime is.
What's his favorite one?
So what is it about Americans then that makes us want the story to be the same? I mean, what does that say about American culture?
I don't know about if I could make a statement about the culture itself, but I think for me the storytelling culture doesn't need to get to the point right away. And I think that's helpful, Lillian, because the issue of patience, the story does insist you patiently wait. And I don't know if that's what you were going to get at, the patience of the story.
And it doesn't have the expected ending either.
That's right.
It's full of twists and turns. It goes on longer. We expect the story is over with the death, and then it continues to twist.
Yes, yeah. And sometimes we might even know the end of the story, and we know how it will turn out. But the story insists that you have to go through these phases, and you have to be patiently waiting.
Patience is a virtue, a Christian virtue, in many religions, a virtue, and a core virtue of our faith. And yet, aren't there times when it's appropriate not to be patient in matters of injustice?
Yes.
Jesus chasing the moneylenders out of the temple.
And I think there's a point of and I haven't quite worked on this completely, but I think there's impatience in the story when Jesus summons Lazarus to life. It's almost impatient with waiting to the resurrection moment and the future. I mean, all it's about is bringing the future to now. Patience insists we wait until we're done with the in-between time between now and the future.
Are you patiently awaiting the completion of your dissertation?
I am doing that.
In 30 seconds? What is it on?
Well, right now my dissertation is on being a mother, raising a 7-year-old, and I'll tell you that's the most amazing school I've been to.
Words of Fire, Spirit of Grace is your book.
Yes.
And it's out now?
It's out now through Cokesbury, through Amazon.com, through the publisher. So it's out. Fantastic. And you can
Wonderful
get that.
title.
Yeah,
Thanks,
thank you.
Grace.
Thank you.